What's going on? Yeah, I got this globe here. All right. So, got Israel right here. This little spot. They came out of Egypt. It's right connected to Africa. So, I mean, can't tell me that there's no black population connected to the Hebrew Israelites, man. It's crazy. But anyway, in the Gad the Seer and in Second Ezra's, it alludes to during the dispersion, the second dispersion, after the time of Solomon, and the kings were, or they were, the northern kingdom was taken away from this little area here. It says that they were taken into Iraq. That's Assyria. That's the northern country. Okay, from here, check this out. You go north, you end up in this. You end up in Russia, but Russia is connected to Asia right here. So at one point in time, these weren't all Caucasian looking people. There's even people now who look Asianoid up in this area. And here on the other side of it, you come up into Alaska. That's the land bridge. That's how they think that people got populated over here into North America. But, alright, according to the history of Ojibwe people, it says basically, it says that they came in here through Canada and this great giant lake in Canada and migrated their way around into the area because they weren't from here. So they had they ran into the Iroquois because they're partially Algonquin kind of speaking. It's called Algic. Algic is this kind of like these Indians up here spoken Algic religion or language. But okay, so it's in Second Ezra's that they got as far as India. Last night I was listening to a book called Ancient Religions of China or Religions of China, and it says in the last chapter, the 5th chapter on the audiobook, it said that there was Jews in China and they were known, and they have a stone tablet from like 1492. They have 3 of them, so there's 3 migrations, it looks like, into China that were Jew, and they were known as those who cut out the sinew. Just like Yosemite, it's those who kill is what the name of the tribe that was around there. I'm just trying to tell you there's a characteristic of even how the names are used in the more ancient times before the baker and the butcher and shoemaker and tailor and banker and other names like that, your government names. There was more specific names, like where you lived, what your customs were. That could be the name of your people. The trait of the raised up seam and cooking meat. Ojibwa means to roast till puckered up, or drawn up, raised up, burnt upwards. Is the name. So like, look, from here, if you go north, you're in Thunder Bay. This is where we ended up at in this area, this Ohio Valley here. Frickin' the Miamis actually were from Ohio. The state here is named Ohio. Ohio. Look, down here, Miami is actually the Indians were from this area. Were called the Miamis. But anyway, you go north from Thunder Bay. I mean, you go over this under this imaginary thing right here. You end up in Asian Russia, and from there, I mean, Israel is only man, it's hard to find, but it's connected from right here. So if you go north of Israel, you keep going north, straight north, you would end up in these islands of the upper Canada and what is this right here, Alaska, and there are the things known as the Eskimos here. And likewise, if you look at Sweden, Finland, look, easily from Israel, the tribe of Dan could have worked its way and ended up over here. And from here, they could still work their way back into this area here, because there's a time when in these areas there was a red-haired people that were buried like Egyptians with Celtic or Scottish style argyle, like cloths around them, and it was in the Mongolian. Here's Mongolia right here. At one point in time, these guys took over everything around here. Uh, it's just the world isn't so hard to as navigate as it would seem, you know. And it's like I'm trying to figure out the route, and it could also, like, once again, there is some overlay and overlap with Viking lore, especially when you go to Iroquois. The Six Nations Confederacy people, they have a lot of overlay with Odin and the Vikings for sure. But there's also overlay in ours, but that's because we hung out with French people, which came from, actually, these Vikings, Dan, populated all of Europe. They're dispersed all through Europe for sure. And then the redheads, you can find them in Ireland somehow. Their peoples, their ancestors somehow were over here, and they traded with Asians. So I mean, there's something was going on during the Dark Ages that's been forgotten. And I just found out there's down here they found an inscription of this guy named Tyre, King of Tyre, and he's mentioned in Gad the Seer, and actually, and it said he was converted into a Gentile. They actually kind of, before there was such a thing as the New Testament Gentile, this Tyre guy, King of Tyre, Hiram, freaking converted to Gentile. You know, basically he followed the 10 Commandments, but he studied the scriptures too. Look, but it was proven that this guy was he was contracted by King Solomon to do this during the time, and it's all marked there. And this was a gold kind of place where they went to go find gold. But also up here in Mexico, somehow these guys had a trade with an African king. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, all it takes is just like, you go straight either way, man. It's not really that. When you look at a globe, it's not really as far as it would seem. It's doable. I mean, it'd be tough, but it's doable. I mean, even in a bunch of people in canoes could literally probably make that, because you don't take into account they can fish. If you know how to collect dew, you'll always have at least a gulp of water every day. I mean, it'd be a tough ride, but there's ways you could do it. And the Vikings did do it. And they taught the Templars, which also had proxies in Jerusalem. So, I mean, and this information probably came, it was hidden, that they knew how to get here for a long time. Because there's a theory that the Great Lakes copper was extracted to create the Bronze Age, which went on over here in this area. It caused a total world changing event from these guys mining the stuff out of here. It's really crazy. And at the same time, you got these guys trading gold and cocaine and coffee with Africans, and you find the Egyptian mummies buried with these corn, tobacco, all these sacred kind of plants of this geographic area, and this down here too. I mean, it's a diverse area. But all this stuff is really interesting. And here's another thing. You know, it's funny when you study some of the Asian philosophy, religion kind of stuff. There's overlay in our, or in not just my people's way they looked at things, but also in other tribes, especially with the circle, the Dodemic system. The Dodemic system, you can find it in our tribe. But over here in Asia, they use the same Dodemic system, just with different kind of animals. And then you can follow it to Genesis 49, back here to, man, this place is hard to find. It's really weird how small this thing is. but yet how it connects everything. So many dots, man. So many ley lines in the way. Pass right through this freaking spot somehow here. And maybe that's why it's chosen that way. Because and then look, you know, from right here, here's Jerusalem anyway. You float down this water here and you'll end up in old Rome ski. And you know, over here where freaking Hitler and all them was at, you know what I mean? It's just like, it's not, that's pretty close to there. And not to mention, equally on the other side, India and China is not very far from there neither. And it does say, you know, the kings of the east at some point will come into this area again. And they already have during Genghis Khan's time. And that's another thing, you know, that's not very heavily documented or mainstreamly looked at because it's not Anglo dominant, Anglo prominent, Anglo centric. They overlook it. It's the same thing with the Indian history because it's not really Anglo-centric. They don't really give a rat's ass. Or about how these guys traded with Egypt or Africa, and then Africa traded with Egypt. They don't too much care because it's not Anglo-centric. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to be a bigot like they are. You know what I'm saying? But I got to speak their language, their legalese. Because, I mean, literally, that's the reason this is all legalese here. This is where the term legalese or the law of the sea comes from. Because if you actually look at all the sea, it means these have different laws. But look, the sea goes right up into the coasts of all these areas, right? So the sea has a different law than the land. And it's like people don't really pay attention to that. You know what I'm saying? Because we're not ocean farers like we used to be. Or even locally here in Michigan, this little small area, this lake is huge. You could have people navigate just this area in canoes for thousands of years and still discover new stuff just in this one little area. Especially you get up here in Canada, look at all this crazy cutouts, man. But back in the day, before planes and trains and automobiles, wow, look at that. Looks like some kind of dolphin. Before trains and planes and automobiles, the rivers and lakes were the highways and expressways. You know what I'm saying? But so people kind of don't take that into account. Even now, when we get stuff, we're still paying taxes, and people are navigating this stuff with goods still. But we don't see none of that because they exchange it all at ports where they have both laws going on. And all we see is the land. We don't really pay attention. But look, because this has all this sea, people could post up in a boat and use their laws against the land. All these different countries. You feel me? That's how they're doing it. That's maritime amnesty law. Law of the sea. Comes from Britain and all of its freaking Britain and Spain and these guys. At one time, these guys were heavy traders. And once again, and it all goes back to Jerusalem, the Knights Templar, the Crusades. They were also, not only were they knights that were trying to take the Holy Land under and put it under tribute, and exploit it. They also were, when they weren't doing that, they were pirates and just miners and other stuff like that. So you get a group of all these other groups, and then they combine their knowledge to become a more powerful militaristic, fascistic, corporatist style of a pyramidal structure, gang mentality, Bloods and Crips. But they're taking Bloods and Crips and putting them to work for the same guy, kind of. I don't know. It's really everything does boil back down to Bloods and Crips, cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians. You know what I mean? It's really stupid, but it's like that, kind of. Even with this law of the land, law of the sea, cowboy and Indian. You know what I'm saying? Instead, they're playing both sides. You know, they're not choosing a side. They're benefiting from both sides. That's the mercenary. You know, these two states go against each other. They're supported from the sea. But really, the sea is just a proxy for one of these countries to send a boat